Hello and welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. This week, the Security Weekly team is out in force at RSAC Conference 2025, streaming sponsored interviews live from Broadcast Alley and Moscone West and the Marriott Marquis all day long throughout the conference. And by the way, we learned that RSAC Conference is not redundant. The C in RSAC now stands for community, and they did this because they do more than just a conference. They're doing webinars and other things throughout the year. So they needed that brand to apply to more than just a conference. For episode 405, we'll be sharing 6 of these pre-recorded interviews that we recorded here with you today. The first, Alex Pinto, the Associate Director of Threat Intelligence at Verizon, shares some highlights from this year's Verizon 2025 Data Breach Investigations Report, also known as the DBIR. Then Vivek Ramachandran, founder of SquareX, joins us to discuss their year-long initiative to draw attention to browser security, which they call the Year of Browser Bugs. Next, ThreatLocker's Chief Product Officer, Rob Allen, discusses securing the overlap where endpoint meets cloud. Jason Michael, Field CTO at Devo, discusses their partnership with the tech team to automate detection engineering. Lori Robinson, VP of Product Management at SailPoint, discusses the need for mature identity security in the age of AI. And finally, Head Kovitz, the CEO and co-founder of Silverfort, shares an identity security playbook for our new machine-driven world. I hope you enjoy watching these executive interviews as much as we did making them. We'll see you next week.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome to RSA Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio on Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Mr. Alex Pinto, Associate Director of Threat Intelligence at Verizon Business. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, thank you, Adrian. It's nice to be here.
Lovely to be here with you. One of my favorite topics. I am like a kid on Christmas when the DBIR comes out. And there have been times when I stay up late. I want to be one of the first to get out a blog post. This year, I was fortunate enough to get an early copy, and we did a podcast together, which is great.
Yes, it was amazing.
So, in its 18th year, DBIR is adult age now. Like, are there still any surprises? I'm curious about people's expectations when it comes out. Like, some people have preformed notions of what they're going to find in the report. But it is, I think it's a good reminder that it is a somewhat unique report in that I don't think anybody else gets as many different data sources, as many different perspectives globally too, like not just the United States at all.
Correct.
Into one place on how failures occur.
Yeah, really the challenge and really the objective that we're trying to hit every year is, can we gather information from more sources that we can from all sorts of the world, from different data types even. Like if you look at our contributor list, there are companies who do vulnerability management, companies who do work around credential protection or MFA or malware companies or incident response companies, even cyber insurers. But really the challenge here is to be able to get all that and use it to make sense of what happened the previous year, right?
Yeah.
I usually talk to the folks at the team. We're like historians. We're looking at all this documentation and we're trying to figure out what did happen. What's the narrative? What will 2024 be remembered by? That has to be memorialized in the 2025 report, right? And so the threat landscape, it changes it changes very slowly until it doesn't, right? It's really fascinating the way that you see some very long standing trends like, oh, ransomware is up again, right?
Yeah.
And we get chuckles everywhere. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course it is.
Yeah.
But hey,
We've seen it go up and down, though. Like, that's
Correct.
not been just
Correct.
up and to the right.
Correct, but it hasn't quite broken the trend yet.
Yeah.
Right, and even I remember in 2018, right, I wasn't even a part of the team yet, but I do remember this anecdote where we kept reporting on ransomware and said, oh, no, we think this is going to be big because of the way it is structured, because of the way it's easy to monetize.
Very flexible.
Right,
Yeah.
and at the time, a lot of the other reports were like, nah, this is a flash in the pan.
Really?
Crypto mining is the thing now.
Yeah.
Which is gonna hey.
How'd that pan out?
Well, this is why we say we're not in the prediction, right? We are in the kind of history business, right? But I mean, you can kind of see where things are going, and it becomes very easy to understand, oh, this is kind of mimicking the trajectory of this specific things that already happened. And so we should expect to see more of those.
Yeah. Yeah, there's still black swan events. There's still, things that are difficult to predict. To your point, like, I don't think anybody predicted generative AI rewriting everyone's roadmaps overnight. Like every tech company, every security company just kind of scrapped everything they were planning on doing to check out this new technology and see what they could do with it. But
Absolutely.
It doesn't look like it's really made a huge dent in the report yet, despite everything you might see at the show here. AI is the biggest threat, is what it's going to feel like. We're now in our third year of AI just absolutely dominating this. But when I read your report, it's not dominated by AI.
Yeah, the thing you have to understand is that just like the term itself has 1,000 definitions, depending who you ask, right? It's really about which aspect of AI influencing security we're interested in talking about, right? At the DBIR, we're mainly focused on, is this being leveraged as a force multiplier or maybe opening new avenues of attack, right? To the known threat actors, to the known things, right? And in that specific realm, right, is when we haven't really found a lot of, so we did find traction, right? There is documented evidence everywhere from the platforms themselves that threat actors are using generative AI to try to augment what they're doing, but we haven't seen bottom line impact, right?
Yeah.
The example we cite on the report is about, 2 years and a half of growth on the usage of synthetic text, right? LLM generated or proto LLM generated in malicious emails like phishing and things of the like.
Which is a no-brainer use case.
Correct, but it hasn't impacted the bottom line on phishing, right? It's been roughly stable. It's not like, phishing got 2 times more dangerous now and so there will be optimizations, there will be improvements in the margins, but there's no groundbreaking thing. If you want to hear about a groundbreaking thing, right, which are things that I think are shifting, right, have to do, again, the endpoint is mostly ransomware, but the huge shift we saw was around credential abuse being kind of the initial access vector there, moving towards each time more into exploitation of vulnerabilities, right?
I keep hearing about info stealers, particularly on Macs, which has not been a hugely targeted platform, but when you consider that's what all the executives want to use, that's what the devs prefer, that's what the engineers prefer, that even the security people prefer Macs, right?
Yeah.
So
no, I have
makes sense to target. Yeah.
It's a huge problem. Again, info stealers is a very old technology, just like ransomware is a very old technology, right? And it has been improved a lot in the margins. And the interest in info stealers is interesting because it's kind of a cumulative effect, as in people are not worried about info stealers now because it has become a problem now. It's because it has been a problem for so long.
Yeah.
And a lot threat actors have built critical mass of credentials they can abuse, right, on very specific systems, right? And when they kind of play that card, have we automated the search and kind of brute forcing, quote unquote. It's not quite brute forcing because they're just credential stuffing, right? But they automate the process. Then you see huge impacts like you saw with the breaches involving the Snowflake platform, right? Snowflake wasn't breached, but because there was this critical mass of credentials that was over time built by all this info stealer activity, right? Suddenly, oh my God, didn't quite figure out that these things could happen, but just becomes, a kind of a clarion call, a very strong signal that, oh yeah, we should definitely be caring about those things.
Yeah, and it's that's an interesting conversation to have there around Snowflake. Like, sure, they weren't breached, but if there's systemic risk built into the product, such that over 100 of your customers get hit around the same time, are you still somewhat responsible for that?
Yeah. So specifically, I think that they were unlucky to be chosen.
Yeah.
Right. I do not think that any qualms you might have on the way that they have, should we have mandated MFA or not? I don't think there's something exclusive to them. It's not like, they messed up. And then everybody else had figured this out from the start, right? And so in that respect, I think they were unlucky to be the one chosen. But the same way that they quickly noticed and they fixed, I think everybody has the same chance, right? Everybody has the same opportunity, every single platform to maybe I should mandate MFA across the board now, right? But
you laid out the recipe in the report. Like, here's why they were chosen. Certainly, there was an aspect of luck. Like they could have chosen other companies, but the fact that there is really interesting data in there,
of course, yes, of course,
and you had this pattern where they were just. I think somebody told me you couldn't even enforce MFA. Like, you could turn it on, but individuals could turn off MFA on their own accounts or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not super sure on the
that
minutia detail there.
Like I've heard that, but once you notice that MFA is missing, it definitely a target for credit stuffing.
Again, I wouldn't demonize them, right? I think they were unlucky. We even made make a joke on the report
I'm
about
not trying to, but just viewing it like the attacker, right?
Of course.
Like
it's an opportunity.
Look at the data that's in here. Accounts aren't well protected. That's attractive.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what your report does is like, help me see my infrastructure through the lens of these breaches.
Yeah, really the message that we want to put forward is that every single interface you have, right, we're really raising the kind of the alarm around third-party involvement in breaches, right, which has doubled, right, from 15%-ish to 30% at this year, right, is that you should have a plan, right? You should be sitting down with your suppliers, with your platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, all of these folks, and understanding, okay, what are the limitations of the model? Think about the shared security model from the Cloud Security Alliance, right? Okay, where does your limitation end? Where does your responsibility end? Where does mine start, right? These are known problems, right? These are things that people have already done work mapping, right? But it takes a lot of due diligence, takes a lot of work to actually make sure that all these lines are drawn very precisely, right? And, I think there's a great opportunity, not even from the customers themselves, right? But also for the vendors to start that conversation, right? They should be, okay, how are we going to do our outreach campaign, all right? How can you use your accounts more securely in our platform, right? In order to minimize the risk of something like just happened last year, happen again, right?
Yeah, and it's I think a term we're hearing more and more is resilience.
Yep.
And part of that is understanding, connecting the business side to security is still something I don't see done enough. So you're talking about shared responsibility model being old, even older, a BIA, a business impact analysis.
Yes.
What does the business care about? What are they dependent on? What is the what are the different tiers? Can we be down? Like we can't stand to be down for less than an hour with this component. Yeah. And understanding that, because your third party risk management program has a long tail. So you've got to prioritize that. And a BIA, I think, is a great way to do that. And I'm surprised more people don't do it. That it's not a standard input to a security program.
Yeah, it's interesting because that specific concern is kind of the third pillar that we bring on the report around kind of the third-party concerns, right? Especially when you had incidents on 2024, like the one in Change Healthcare, CDK Global, right? These, if you look at what happened to them, it's your, garden variety ransomware.
Yeah.
However, because their availability was affected, right? The systems were down. Their customers couldn't operate, right? Health insurance couldn't charge, car dealerships couldn't sell. across the country, right? It's really puts into perspective again, kind of the whole BIA thing you talked about, right? How much those companies were aware that, okay, I have like kind of a single point of failure here, right? And again, this is not some sort of, oh, we shouldn't be automating all this business critical. No,
Yeah.
the nature of business today is to try to find those kinds of efficiencies, right? But sometimes in the rush to find the efficiencies, right, we don't quite understand some of the risks that might be involved in it,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Well, the other component of resilience is agility.
correct.
Right? If this supplier went away tomorrow, and it's something that you rely on day to day for operations, how quickly could you make that shift?
Yes.
And a lot of that it has to do with your architecture. So CrowdStrike, I think, is another interesting example here where it wasn't a data breach, but it was an incident. It was an availability incident for a lot of companies, and led a lot of companies to have to think about, okay, like this is. And it was kind of a black swan event.
Yes, that certainly was one of those.
Yeah,
yes.
it's where I don't think anybody
had it on
anticipated
the
that or
protocol.
even realized how much CrowdStrike, that Falcon host product was touching.
Yeah. Well, if anything, it was a huge ad, because now you see how many customers they have.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. Like again, with humans are bad at predicting.
course.
So many people with the hot takes on, oh, CrowdStrike is done now. They're finished. They're
No,
never going to come
absolutely
back.
not.
Like, no, that makes no sense. Like,
Yeah, but again, it's about if you never mess up, if you're a vendor and you never mess up,
yeah,
your customers can never fully trust you.
yeah.
Maybe it's 9% trust, but if you mess up and you handle it correctly, that's what 100% trust is.
That's
you know
it.
What I mean?
You have to mess up well.
Yes.
You have to fail
Which is incredibly
gracefully.
hard. Yes,
You must
incredibly
fail
hard.
gracefully.
Yeah, but I think that, look, if the examples of CrowdStrike, the examples of Change Healthcare help people be more, also, I mean, again, we talk a lot about the cybers, right? A lot of what we see on the show floor here is about the cybers, and they're going to break in, and there's malware, and there's the next flavor of whatever they are. But availability is a huge concern. It's something, it's core. You cannot, protecting something means it has to keep running, right? And we always try to bring kind of the what we talked in the report kind of back to the ground floor level, right? It's not all nation state. It's not all, this dastardly vulnerabilities. No, there's a lot of errors. Somebody tripped on the power cord kind of stuff, It happens.
A
and it's
lot of
very
people don't
damaging.
even think about that part.
Correct.
Like they're only interested in the breaches. But yeah, so many non-malicious errors that result in all kinds of
Correct.
incidents. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I think there's like 4 main areas. Do you want to summarize the report and then we'll wrap up the conversation?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I think we touched on all of them or most of them, but let's
It
go.
would be
over-
good to go
of
down the
course,
list.
Of course.
Yeah.
So main finding that we want to talk about is really the growth of third-party exploitation. Sorry, excuse me. Third-party involvement in breaches. They were not the ones exploiting. There are some, not a lot. But so went from 15 to 30%. And there's like kind of a few pillars there, right? We talked about the vulnerability management piece, right? A lot of these are, I bought a specific solution from a company and that solution was found to be vulnerable, right? It was especially hard this year, right? There was a lot to talk about for sure, given that if you look at 2023, it was mostly like move it and file servers, whereas in 2024, were edge of network devices, right? So your firewalls, your VPNs, and those you cannot say, just put it behind the firewall. You are the firewall, right?
Yeah. That's our whole purpose.
Correct.
Is to be exposed.
Exactly. A lot of concern there. We talk a lot about that. It's something that I think people need to really pay attention. We do the info stealer piece.
Yep.
Right.
Credentials
associated kind of with the Snowflake story, really brought it to the preeminence, right? And we talk a little bit about the availability piece too, even though we don't really go into a deep dive right now. But it's really important to understand how those relationships, they touch everything, right? At what we're trying to do, right? If you thought defending your own organization was hard, right? I have bad news for you, right? You also have to think about all those interfaces.
Yeah.
But again, it's solvable. It requires communication, requires partnership, right? And this is really what we're trying to advocate. We're really kind of a glass half full people at the DBIR,
That's
right?
nice.
Maybe we're naive, but we try to be hopeful, right? And we try to at least signal that, okay, there are ways out here. They might not be easy, but there's definitely stuff that anybody can do. Just like You finish reading the report. Okay, this is what I should do this year to kind of try to be a little bit better for next year.
So third-party credentials, I think ransomware was one of them.
Ransomware was, well, yeah.
And
was
then
pretty
what
big.
was the
vulnerability management piece around the edge device?
exploitation?
Exploitation,
Yeah, exploitation.
yes.
That's right. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Alex.
Of course, it's a
This has been
pleasure.
great. Always love talking with you. To find out more about Verizon Business, please visit securityweekly.com/Verizon RSAC. For all RSA 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Alex, for the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I love chatting with you. Stick around. We'll be back after the break with more interviews live from the RSA Conference 2025. This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly.
Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview is Vivek Ramachandran. He's the founder and CEO at SquareX. Welcome, Vivek.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. Super excited to be back again.
Yes. Well, we're going to talk about Year of Browser Bugs, but before we get to the initiative, let's talk the browser landscape for a second, right? So I'm a big app user data guy. Applications, most now are accessed via the browser. What's been happening from a browser attack surface?
That's a great question. So the browser has become the new endpoint. And as you rightly said, local apps are now cloud apps. Local storage is cloud storage.
Right.
Also, all identity sits within the browser now because every single enterprise user uses the browser to access resources. And this is really where, what's been happening in the last few years is attackers are starting to realize that the keys to the kingdom sit within the browser. And the browser has slowly started to become an initial attack vector, which is being increasingly exploited. Now, a big tailwind in this is also the fact that browser vendors have been constantly updating browsers. So now you have newer technologies like WebAssembly, WebRTC, WebSocket, gRPC, and whatnot. And really, this is breaking down existing solutions like SASE SSE, which sit in the cloud and for the past decade have been happily, just looking at traffic and being able to reconstruct what happens at the application layer.
Right.
They can't do that anymore. And that's the big paradigm shift is attackers know this. Now they are sliding attacks through the browser.
Oh, interesting. So what we traditionally would do is put a secure web gateway in front of my app and it would catch everything for me. Not anymore.
Not anymore. And the simple reason is secure web gateways were invented almost a decade back.
Yeah.
Those,
Maybe even a little longer.
Yeah,
Vivek.
probably a little longer. And those were times when browsers were very simple website renderers.
Yeah.
And you could still look at network traffic and reconstruct what is happening at the application layer. But now you have complex UI frameworks. Everything is a binary protocol. Things need to be more real time.
Yeah.
And because of all of this, traffic coming in from the browser is no longer simplistic. You really cannot sit in the cloud, just look at that traffic, which is really flat coming from every browser tab all at the same time, and try to figure out, hey, what is the user really doing here? Is he clicking on a link? Is this a double click jacking attack? Is this something getting downloaded? Because much of secure web gateway technology was looking at the headers to figure out something's downloading.
Right.
But now everything goes through WebSocket. That's a binary channel. You don't know where a file started or ended. You really don't even know that a file is being sent.
Yeah.
And so last year at DEF CON main stage, we spoke about last mile reassembly. And this was really, death by 1,000 cuts for secure web gateways.
Got it. Now, what's lacking in the native browsers that you need something different, right? Because everybody's using Chromium basically through the Chrome ecosystem. Why don't the browsers do this themselves? What's lacking there in the browser technology?
Great question once again. So Matthew, all of these browsers were originally built for just consumers. The whole idea was let's maximize user experience. Let's make it super easy for a user to be able to onboard himself to a browser and be able to just do what he has to do, right? It was supposed to be for our grandparents, my dad, people who aren't very tech conversant. So by definition, because user experience was the only North Star, there was a massive lack of any form of security controls because no one ever expected 20, 25 years back that the browser is the enterprise's new infrastructure.
Yeah, it's like the entry to like almost every enterprise application out there.
Exactly. So SaaS apps, web apps, whatnot. And if you look at people in their 20s, they don't even use Outlook Express anymore. It's all just webmail, Office 365.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we used to have Exchange servers and all that other fun stuff. So what is the initiative around Year of Browser Bugs?
So, I kind of go long back. I've been in cybersecurity 20 years. And HD Moore had started this month of browser bugs, I think 17 years back. And the whole idea there was every single day of the month, they would go publish vulnerabilities in web browsers. But those were software exploits because back in the day, you could just run a fuzzer and find all of these security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we took inspiration from that and we said, look, software vulnerabilities has been reasonably in control, but application layer controls being missing. There are so many different business logic attacks, browser extension attacks, which you can orchestrate, but they aren't technically a browser software bug.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So that's when we said, why not go back to the old roots? Because all old is new now.
Yeah, right.
And let's go ahead and have this whole month of browser bugs initiative. And the whole idea is every month, SquareX researchers are actively finding newer architectural vulnerabilities in browsers in general. And we are publishing it online, telling browser vendors how to fix it, what has to be done. We've already run it for a couple of months. Browser sync jacking, polymorphic extensions, browser native ransomware. All of this has been found, put out there, and hopefully this is helping, browsers get more secure.
Yeah. So what is like the foundational, are there a set of attacks that people should focus on first? Like it's kind of the low hanging fruit of browser security.
Yes. So the lowest hanging fruit at this point in time, because most enterprises don't manage their browsers, is browser extensions.
Got it.
Almost every employee is going and just installing those extensions. And any time that there is, let's say, a new announcement in AI that OpenAI comes up with a new version of ChatGPT.
Or DeepSeek.
Or DeepSeek.
Yeah, let's go DeepSeek.
Attackers are putting it out there in social media and saying, if you install this browser extension, we can give you free access to the premium version. And this is causing that frenzy because, everybody in the enterprise wants to use these AI tools to summarize, build documents and whatnot. They go install it. And because enterprises don't monitor the browser, they don't even know these browser extensions
exist.
Yes. And in my mind, extensions are akin to untrusted applications of the endpoint world.
Right.
And they have access to everything in the browser. They can read data, session. They can go ahead, hijack, do things on behalf of the user. So it's as good as you've taken over the browser.
Interesting, because we were earlier talking about kind of the evolution of AI, and we talked through bring your own device, right? Unmanaged devices was a thing, right? And nobody would let them on your networks until they found a way to manage them. So we evolved into MDM and MAM technologies, right? We had the same thing with the endpoints and in other areas. We see the same thing now with the browser, right? So the browser is now the unmanaged asset in the environment that creates an attack path, a very important attack path because it can get access to critical applications. So is this where the browser security markets is evolving, is because we need to do something to manage these browsers?
Exactly. And the browser is the wild, wild west. And here's another big reason why. We are so used to in the enterprise to be in full control of every application we deploy.
Yeah.
So when a newer version of an application comes, you decide whether to deploy it or not.
Right.
But the browser completely breaks all of these rules. Just remind yourself of the number of times Chrome tells you to update in a month.
I know.
So which means the applications are changing all the time. As an enterprise, you have zero control. And this is really where what we are starting to see is as attackers are starting to exploit this more and more, enterprises now have a heightened sense of awareness that there's a massive visibility gap in the browser. There are so many attacks which can live and die the entire life cycle within the browser itself, identity attacks and whatnot. And hence it's important to level up and actually have browser native security, which is tools which can natively sit within the browser, secure it, give you that visibility, block attacks right there, dead in the tracks.
Right. So we can force an operating system update, not necessarily force a browser update. And Chrome does a pretty good job of telling you when there is one. Sometimes it'll just do it anyways. But then it goes from green to yellow to red. And eventually you realize, oh yeah, I should really restart my browser. But that leaves a pretty big window for potential attacks to happen, right?
Absolutely. So one is definitely the whole software vulnerabilities themselves.
Yeah.
The other is users just using the browser to just callously flaunt every single policy that you have. I'll give you the most common example, single sign-on. Almost every employee uses that as a convenience feature to sign up on random websites.
Oh yeah.
Because, hey, sign in with Google, sign in with Microsoft. And this is really where your corporate IT, your shadow SaaS, is actually expanding its footprint via the browser. And because you have no visibility, you really don't know what's happening in there.
Exactly. I think about that now, right? Like, I want to log into this application, just log in via Google.
Exactly.
Boom, done.
Yes.
But what you don't understand as a user necessarily is the potential downstream risk of doing that. And so now you've created a new attack vector.
Absolutely. And I think once enterprise identity leaks to all of those third-party websites, there's very little you can do. Now, I can give you an example of a very worrisome attack. Almost all employees tend to go online and try to find tools where they could upload a document and get a PDF.
Right.
Because most employers don't want to get you a PDF, conversion license.
Right. The OCR license, yeah.
So what attackers are doing is they are putting up these ads, and this is all your malvertising, and then targeting specific employee locations by city with those ads and having you sign in with Google. So now here's what's happening. An average employee goes in, signs up with Google, uploads a document. In that third-party app, which the attacker controls, everything just works perfectly. But now the attacker knows your organization, the name of the employee, and what document he just converted.
Right.
And so we are seeing a lot of this.
You use that now to create a potential phishing or business email compromise attack, right? Because what you've done is you've given up some data, you've given up the organization, you got a valid email address. Like, can you now craft some really interesting social engineering attacks on that?
Exactly, absolutely. Because here's what's happened. You signed up on the third-party SaaS app. The attacker has sent you an email to have you confirm your email, which means now all your spam filters have gone ahead and accepted that as a trusted domain. And then most of the time when people create these documents, they want to share it with other people. So many of these tools even have share inside your organization. And that becomes an easy way for an attacker to then laterally start, growing within the organization, kind of breaking in. So this is something we are seeing more and more, is rather than using those plain vanilla broken English spear phishing emails, just use these apps, which everyone in the organization is searching online for.
Right. So what do you, we've got your browser security field manual here, and I need you to sign it when we're done. But how would you recommend an organization to go through and start to build a secure browser environment? Like, what are the steps they should take?
So I think to begin with, start managing your browsers like yesterday. Almost every single browser allows you to do central management, just like mobile devices. And this is something you can do. Chrome has Chrome Enterprise, Edge has the same. Even Firefox and Safari, kind of lend you to some level of remote management. Once you do that, lock down what essentially you don't need. As a simple example, if you're a bank, you probably don't want people installing random extensions. So immediately lock in and harden the browser. Now, beyond that, you probably want a browser native security product to go ahead, give you that extra visibility. SquareX, a bunch of other folks have been building something similar. And that is really where now you're kind of building that whole layered approach to security, is manage the infrastructure.
So essentially manage all the browsers.
Yes. Harden.
Limit what you can install, right? Just like if you don't have admin privileges, you can't install software. It's basically the same thing in the browser, right? Just not allow them to add extensions and then layer in a browser security product. Now, are those products basically browser plugins themselves then?
Yes.
But so, just trusted ones, right?
Yes. So what's been happening is, I think there has been like this whole split between should you have a dedicated browser
Right.
Or should you go ahead and integrate with existing browsers?
Right.
And what I typically tell CISOs is, look, if browser is the new infrastructure, you don't want to own infrastructure. Because at any point something goes wrong on a website, there is a user experience issue, the security team gets blamed. Instead, if you're deploying a browser extension, you are controlling and securing the browser infrastructure.
Right.
And browser extensions are totally silent, sit in the background, nothing really changes in the main browser. The user experience is identical. So just like you're deploying an endpoint EDR agent, which just runs in the background and secures you, secure browser extensions can convert any browser into a fully secure managed browser, giving you full visibility into what's going on and block attacks right there.
So keep your Chrome, keep your Edge, keep your whatever, Mozilla, Firefox stuff. Keep what you're using, but centrally manage it, harden it, and then layer in security on top of that. Then you'll have a much better secure browser environment.
Exactly. And the exact analogy I would use is this is what we've been doing at the endpoint for the last 25 years, right? You want to be operating system agnostic. Regardless of whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac, you want your EDR just to run, give you the same level of coverage and depth and attack visibility regardless. And this is exactly what needs to happen in the browser space as well, if we all believe in the thesis that the browser is the new endpoint.
Right. So do you call this market browser detection and response?
I would love to call this market that, and SquareX is trying to pioneer browser detection response. And the whole idea is building an EDR for the browser. So if we say we are, a browser is the new endpoint, then you require an EDR for that endpoint. That's what we are building.
Perfect. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you so much.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/SquareX Vivek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Everyone, stay tuned. We have more interviews coming up.
Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Rob Allen, Chief Product Officer at ThreatLocker. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Mandy. Good to be here.
Yes, you had a little bit of a harrowing experience getting here.
I don't want to speak about it, to be honest. It's too fresh. It's too fresh, but we're here now, and that's all that's important.
It is, and I am incredibly curious because going back to the title of what ThreatLocker wants to bring out to our audience today, it is securing the overlap where endpoint meets cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my understanding with ThreatLocker being completely focused on endpoint security, how and why are you feeling like you've got to pivot to cloud right now?
I wouldn't describe it as a pivot to cloud.
Okay.
I would describe it as solving some of the problems with cloud that our customers have. We are an endpoint protection platform. Our focus has always been on the endpoint, 100% on the endpoint, because realistically, that's where most of the action happens. It's where most cyber attacks start. But equally, customers have concerns. They have aspects of their infrastructure that they're worried about. I mean, Office 365 is probably the biggest one right now because a lot of organizations use it, and it's a prime target for bad guys. So it's one of the things that we have tried to address for our customers. Again, a lot of the developments that we make, a lot of the things that we do come from customers saying, hey, it's really cool, all of those other things you do, but could you do this as well?
Okay.
And some of the could you do this is our crazy talk and things that we can't do or we're not going to do, but some of them are logical extensions of everything else that we do, and helping people to secure their cloud environments is one of them.
That's interesting because I was actually curious on whether or not you as a company had gone, hey, so many people use Microsoft 365, we need to also pay attention to this, or it sounds more like it came from the customers.
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
It's a bit of both. With most good ideas, we kind of have inklings of, where people's problems are, but equally customers say, hey, it would be cool if you could do this as well. I mean, even we look at ourselves as a customer because we use our own software. We use our endpoint protection, obviously. We use Office 365. Office 365, how would I put this, is always a concern. I mean, there's so much information out there. I mean, you're a stolen token away from a data breach in a lot of cases. I mean, in my previous life, I worked for an IT company back home in Ireland before I joined ThreatLocker. And again, stolen credentials, phish credentials, email takeover. I mean, I won't say it was a daily occurrence, but it was quite a regular occurrence. And I mean, over there, you've got GDPR to worry about. You've got data protection laws that you need to concern yourselves with. But I mean, it's the same here. The problem is the same. And despite all the attempts, it's not one that's been solved. Because, I mean, saying, 2FA everything, absolutely, everybody should 2FA everything. But even as an organization, I mean, we've got 550, 600 staff. Not all of them have phones. So 2FAing all of them is not that easy. And as I said, even if you do have 2FA, then token theft is a serious concern for a lot of organizations as well. So it's something we can help with our cloud control.
Absolutely. And I'm also curious now, I got to attend Zero Trust World, which was fantastic. And one of my highlights was speaking with your special projects team.
Yes.
And of course, I had a lot of questions about ring fencing and about other aspects. So I'm curious, whenever you saw this rise, this need, and go, wow, we need this, did you feel like you already had the staff in place that was going to handle it technically? Yes?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're very much of a mindset of if we need to make something, if we need to do something, we will build it. We've got an incredible development team. They can turn things around, as quickly as any. We've got, as you said, the special projects team are incredible.
That's fantastic.
And look, they have the best job in the world because people just throw wild things at them and say, go and investigate this, or how do we solve this problem? I mean, a lot of this actually started with, we were looking at doing storage control policies, which is an existing part of the platform around protecting access to tokens.
Okay.
So one of the jobs that we gave to the special ops team was to go and make token theft happen.
Okay.
So, write some Python scripts, do whatever you need to do to demonstrate how easy it is to steal tokens. So off they did, came back a few hours later going, yeah, we've replicated this now. Here's my Git. I'm going to steal this token, and here's my Git in another machine without having to log in. And we're like, oh, okay. So yeah, they've got a really cool job, but they're really cool guys as well.
Oh, they were fantastic. And they humored all of my questions because I came with some of the white papers I had really dug into.
Yes.
And I am happy to see really like ThreatLocker's posturing for being able to respond to this and really take on Microsoft 365 tenant protection.
It's absolutely, but it's not just the plan for us ultimately is not just to be able to help people protect Microsoft 365. It's anything that you can do conditional access or limit by IP address.
Okay.
So we're looking at doing Git, for example. It's something, again, we use ourselves. It's something that you're able to lock down access by IP addresses. And the whole idea behind our cloud control is that we're going to be able to take the IP addresses that we're gathering from people's machines and people's phones, and we're going to be able to send them to whatever cloud service it is and say, hey, allow these IP addresses connect and block everything else. I mean, it's a mirror image of what we do with network control. It's just expanding that idea of network control to cloud. So network control, general idea is to block by default and permit by exception. So only allow the devices dynamically that need to connect. This is exactly the same thing, but for cloud services. So as I said, we're looking at doing Git, we're looking at doing G Suite, we're looking at expanding it to other cloud services that will allow or be able to take those IP addresses in and allow access to them.
Excellent. Now I'm trying to work out in my mind how this enhances or what additional help does this give to your customers with the rise of non-human agents across every I don't even want to say silo domain. It's just like across every single thing that is attached to the internet.
Yes.
So with the rise of non-human agents, do you feel like that has changed endpoint protection or your focus, or is it still just blocked by default and you still have the same?
The beauty about the approach that we take, the beauty about the deny by default, permit by exception approach is that generally speaking, you don't need to respond to individual threats or individual tactics or individual techniques, or whether it's coming through AI or whether it's coming through a human being. I mean, fundamentally the principle is the same and the solution is basically the same. So that gives us as an organization a lot of freedom, and rather than having to respond to each individual threat, each new thing that's happening, we know that denying by default, the reality is it's probably going to stop it anyway. So it gives us a lot of freedom to look at other ways that we can expand on that concept. So as I said, the likes of storage control, it's the same principle. It's, restricting access programmatically, or what programs can access what data. It's like, as I said, network control. We're blocking inbound network connections dynamically, or allowing rather inbound network connections dynamically and blocking everything else. So it's just new ways of expanding on that same core concept of default deny.
So my understanding is you have 3 separate products, right? Cloud Control, Cloud Detect, and Patch Management. Now, is Patch Management a separate product?
Patch management is a separate product, yes.
Okay. And can you explain more of what that is?
Sure. So patch management, the reason we decided to do patch management, and again, a lot of these things that we end up doing are kind of logical extensions of what we're doing anyway. So obviously network control, as I said, it was a logical extension. Patch management, the reason it's a logical extension of what we're doing is we see all the files that are in a system. We see everything that's being executed within an environment. Your traditional patch management system, and full disclosure, we used a third party patch management solution ourselves, which for the last 6 months has been going, everything is fine. Nothing needs patching. Everything is up to date. You've got nothing to worry about. And we were like, okay, that's fine. We turned our own patch management system, which, as I said, is looking at the individual hashes of the files rather than what's in the registry and add remove programs. And we discovered that we had 413 machines running 28 out-of-date pieces of software. But it's, again, comes from the visibility. It comes from the fact that we can see everything. We know what's on your machine. We know what's running on your machine. We know what's out of date. We know what's up to date. And therefore we can give, and again, it doesn't matter if something is in a downloads folder, it doesn't matter if it's portable executable, all those things that your traditional patch managers are going to miss, we can see, and therefore we can tell you it's a problem and also patch them.
Interesting. Do you feel like that is a step toward autonomous patching?
Well, we can do that as well. So we can
Okay.
actually set up what are called patch policies. So patch policy could be, well, look, I want Chrome to be kept up to date in my environment. I don't want it to be on the absolute latest version immediately. I'm going to give it a 3-day window after a new version has been released, and then 3 days comes, Chrome gets patched on my machines. So yeah, it is possible to do it autonomously as well. It's not that you have to manually go in and click, patch on every machine or every piece of software.
Now, my understanding is that ThreatLocker does not use AI.
That is true.
Okay.
We it's very limited. We have tried it in very limited scenarios with mixed results.
Okay.
So, for
Can you
example,
give please.
I'll give
Give an
absolutely. I'll
example.
give you an example. So, we at Zero Trust World, the other product that we released was web control. So, effectively web filtering, done through the ThreatLocker agent, managed through the ThreatLocker portal. Obviously, with web control, one of the big challenges is categorization. So knowing what a particular website is. So securityweekly.com, what is that? So we have, partially, we've got human beings who are actually checking things out. So when our cyber heroes basically get a request for an exception to be made, they will check it out as a human and say, well, this is a, Security Weekly website. We have investigated or started trying sending some stuff to LLMs to try and get the same information, or try and see what an LLM will say. And as I said, the results have been somewhat varied. It's sometimes right, but often wrong. And wrong with confidence is a really interesting part of it. It's not just, I'm not sure about this, maybe it's this, maybe it's not. It's not. No, it's definitely this. It's not that. So we have, as I said, tried implementing it, not in terms of the core of what we do, not in terms of what we allow and what we don't allow. That's still 100% AI-less, but we are dipping our toes into the water, shall we say, in some areas with mixed success.
That's beautiful. I mean, knowing that you're trying it and getting the mixed success and not just forging ahead when it doesn't
Oh
actually
no,
make
absolutely,
sense.
absolutely.
And not calling out that, you know, the, the hyperbole of just everything being AI driven when you're saying there aren't the actual results for it. To me, that's comforting.
It's one of my pet peeves, shall we say, with the cybersecurity industry as a whole. It's not just my pet peeve with the cybersecurity industry, and I have to confess, I fell for it as well. So I have a completely off the subject, but I have a pool robot at home which cleans my pool, and it's an AI pool robot, believe it or not. Now, the AI pool robot is the stupidest thing I have ever come across in my entire life. It basically does, and I don't know if wheelies is a thing in America. Is wheelies a thing?
Absolutely.
Wheelies. So it basically
I can my wheelchair.
it basically goes along the bottom of the pool and then does a wheelie for no reason. But this is my AI pool robot. So as I said,
And it's not current. It's not because
no. It just feels okay. I'm going to do a wheelie. I'm going to pull a wheelie now. And again, I bought it because I thought, ooh, AI. Yeah, I don't know what it's actually brought to the. If I'd be far happier if we just go around the pool and pick up stuff, but no, it decides wheelies are the appropriate thing for a pool robot to do.
Or this is Rob deciding that AI can't have fun.
Look, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop anybody from having fun, but just not when you're supposed to be doing other things like cleaning my pool. Incidentally, my pool robot said no, and that's way back to the pool robot company to send me another pool robot, which is again will have AI. Maybe it's not just won't be a stupid AI this time. Hopefully,
Let's hope. Maybe it'll make like nice poetry or something else to help you out. Now, back to this though.
sorry,
What?
that was my fault.
No, I don't think there's a fault in that at all. But I do want to make sure our audience understands like the integration for using cloud control. What does that look like and how quickly does it help the security teams that enable it?
So cloud control specifically is really, really easy. I mean, effectively, we are gathering IP addresses from any device that's running threat lockers, any Windows machine, any Mac, every Linux machine. Basically, they're all reporting their external IP addresses back to threat locker. We've also developed apps for iOS and Android, which effectively do the same thing. So it's basically just saying, look, this is Rob's IP address now. This is Rob's IP address when he leaves home. This is Rob's IP address when he's on a plane. This is Rob's IP address when he lands in San Francisco. And they're basically then pushed up to a named location in Office 365, which has been configured to allow those named locations to connect. So it's really, really simple. It's not a heavy lift in any way, shape, or form. It's really simple to set up, really simple to configure. It's just a matter of gathering IP addresses and adding them to named locations.
Fantastic. Rob, thank you so very much for being with us. To find out more about ThreatLocker, please visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLockerRSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Rob, for the conversation.
Thank you.
And to our audience, please stick around. We'll be back after the break with more interviews live from the RSAC Conference 2025.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio and Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Jason Michael, Field CTO at Devo. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So very interesting conversation today. Unfortunately, we only have two spots up here. It would have been nice to have Fred from the tech team up here, but really looking forward to talking about this partnership here. So I think starting off, it would be good, just in case people don't know what Devo does, don't know what the tech team does, if you could just give us the spiel there, the elevator pitch for both companies.
So from a Devo perspective, we are a security data analytics platform, and we snapped on a foundation of threat detection and incident response to be able to streamline the day in the life of SOC operators. And the nice thing about that as well is Devo's data agnostic, so you can ingest any data type, structured or unstructured, and be able to leverage that to monitor for any type of situation you want, whether it's cyber, fraud, compliance, whatever the necessary things may be. So it really is a streaming data analytics platform, so you're not having to wait for data processing, indexing, and all that. really is enabling real-time threat detection for organizations.
Yeah, you're applying that rules as the data comes through.
Absolutely, in real time. And as far as the tech team, of course, their mode of operation is being able to generate real-world life attack scenarios on the fly using AI to ingest any kind of threat report, like from CISA or any source for that matter, and be able to extract all the TTPs out of it in a matter of seconds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And being able to produce a simulation of that attack.
Okay.
And as we all know, when these threat reports show up on people's bows, the CISO comes to their teams and say, are we ready for this new ransomware campaign or whatever it might be? And they get that deer in headlight look.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I got to get back to you. And they got to spend hours and hours reading that report.
Yeah.
And then hours and days, if not sometimes weeks, depending on the complexity of how do we build the rules to make sure we can detect this new attack.
Yeah.
Well, that is a broken process. Nowadays, there is the capabilities to automate and streamline that process. But it doesn't end there, because at the point where you can finally figure out the TTPs and IOCs and all of that, how do you test it? Mm-hmm. The worst thing that organizations have to traditionally deal with is we built these new rules and we won't know if they're really working until it hits us.
Until we get attacked.
And we don't want to be figuring out, are we covered when the attack is on our doorstep? So this is the Detect Team engine is allowing the organizations to continuously assess and determine, are my detection rules up to date? Are they being modified when new modifications or variants or changes in this new attack occurs? Because we all know, especially like in a ransomware campaign or any type of traditional attack, the underlying code is always the same. It's repurposed. They change some techniques or tactics, but there's always foundational stuff there. And a majority of the attack sim things are like, well, look for this hash, look for this IOC. Mm-hmm. And if they change it, then you're like,
easy to change.
It's very easy to change. So then you're kind of like, oh, we're covered, but then they tweak it for the subvert detections.
Evasions are very easy.
Very much so. So that's the real big power of the Detect Team engine, is being able to see if there's a new modification or a variant, make sure you're up to date, your detection rules get automatically updated, and you can simulate it to make sure that, not just your detections are there, but your incident response playbooks. Right. What are my playbooks kept up to date to be able to respond automatically and efficiently?
Yeah. Yeah, so two really important things I see there. One is not everybody can afford the detection engineering talent that they need.
Right.
So I think it's super important for vendors to be able to provide that.
Yes.
And then the other side of that, a lot of security people just don't have engineering backgrounds. They don't think about quality assurance and testing their stuff. Like an example I often use is from the Equifax breach. The company did a lot right. They were very quick to respond. They knew it was a concern. The emerging threats team produced a snort rule to detect an attack against the Struts 2 vulnerability, and they handed it off to the SecOps team who deployed the snort rule. Neither team thought to test it to see if it worked, and it did not work.
Right, exactly.
So, a very important component here to have that kind of feedback loop, because even existing rules, I imagine, you've got to go back and test those because the data itself might change.
Right.
That you're streaming into the platform that you're changing. Oftentimes, different logs, events, and things like that, you upgrade to a new major version of something. I remember from managing SIMs back in the day where you had to have a parser for everything.
Yes.
It was a bad day when you found out one of your major platforms had a new log format.
Right.
Then somebody would have to go back and rewrite the parser.
Yes, exactly.
And until they did that, we couldn't do anything with that data.
Right.
That data was useless to us.
Right. And even if it fired some type of high-level alert, if the data that's produced to the analyst is not parsed correctly, I don't know what to do with this thing. So yes, that's a never-ending battle for the engineering and the analysts.
And if that detection rule is expecting an IP address to be in this format, in this field, in a certain way, and that changes, those detection rules can start failing without you being aware. And you don't want things to fail silently.
Right, especially when it's actually hitting your bow.
Yeah. So let's see here. So how does that integration work? Is it pretty simple integration for people to implement.
It really is. The nice thing
tools
about
plug
this,
together easily.
yes, the nice thing about it is both are SaaS solutions. So bottom line is when you spin up your environment like the Devo security analytics platform, you create a user account with the access necessary for API connections to the Detect Team tenant. And it does it from twofold. One, it's going to be able to automatically deploy the detection rules when they get created, but also be able to send the data to the SIM to make sure the rules are working. It's very simple. But another unique thing that I think is very powerful for the Detect Team side of it is when you configure and you say, I'm going to launch this simulation, you can also, before you launch it, go into the simulator library and say, this is my my technology stack in my environment. This is my EDR, this is my firewall, this is my proxy, this is my blah, 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 blah. So that way, when you launch the simulation, it's 100% replicating what it would look like live in your environment. So it's just not throwing IOCs and data. It's 100% replicating what this thing's going to look like. So that's a very, very compelling piece of it. But once you go in and configure the tech stack, you go in and configure the APIs, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And then you launch simulations on the fly. You can build your own simulations if you had custom use cases in it that you needed, like insider threat or whatever, application monitor, whatever the scenario might be. You can customize on the fly your own attack simulations in Detect Team. But the nice thing is, because of this integration is so strong, if it generates the data sources from the telemetry selections you choose, the parsing's already there. It knows how to send the data in the right format, so the detection rules will fire, and the presentation layer is parsed out so the analyst can get the context they need.
Right. Yeah, and just thinking about the workflow from the analysts themselves, this kind of elevates what the type of stuff they're doing day to day.
It does.
Right? And instead of spending as much time writing the code for the detection, things like that. What do you see them doing, and what's the cadence of using the product? Is this something where you find people on a weekly basis? They're generating new detections, they're testing them. Is it a daily thing?
That's a good point. So there's multiple use cases in that environment. One could be if there's a new thing that hit the wild. I got to load this thing in and let the tools do it.
That triggers activity.
That triggers activity. But secondly, Detect Team comes out of the box with a very large library of simulations. They're always monitoring the new attacks in the wild, so they'll create their own out-of-the-box simulations. So think of purple teaming exercises, or tabletop exercise or things like that. People schedule and do those on a regular basis, right? Well, the thing about this is you could say, all right, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, I'm going to launch a handful of attacks to make sure our detections are current, but also our incident response and incident handling procedures are current. So that's a regular thing, because if you're not doing that as a security operations center and you're just waiting for something to hit you, that's the worst time to fine tune. Yeah. So it needs to be reoccurring regularly. But then again, the nice thing is that having the flexibility that when something new hits the wild, it takes me seconds to generate it and test it instead of weeks, if not months, to do it.
And as you mentioned purple teaming, I imagine this is like a really good intermediate step to get you ready for actual humans to come in and do the pen tests, purple teaming, that kind of thing. And that's, as a former pen tester, that was something that was really frustrating to me, that a lot of folks didn't leverage their pen test as an opportunity to test their ability to detect attacks. You create I'd create a domain admin account or turn off antivirus on an endpoint or something like that. I know there's alerts telling them that these things are happening, but nobody sees it.
Exactly.
And it also addresses, I think, one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest gaps we see is we'll see vendors come out and say, we detected SolarWinds or something like that. Sure, you can detect everything if you just turn on all the logs. So, technically, it's there somewhere.
Yes.
But if a human doesn't see it, it doesn't count.
That's right. And that's in two things with that situation. One, we've always heard for decades about the alert fatigue problem.
Yeah.
Right? Well, there's another fatigue problem that the industry faces is threat intel fatigue.
Yeah.
Right? So they have the ability to extract automatically the newest, latest, and greatest threat intelligence, being able to automatically and dynamically create the rules and test them is really streamlining the security operations centers. But more importantly is we all know tier one analysts are being fried and burnt regularly. So this is going to enable them to truly test their triage, their automations, their incident response functions and capabilities and skills, instead of having to worry about management of rules.
Yeah.
I mean, those are old school methodologies of how much time do we have to waste and not waste, but spend on engineering of the SIM. There's technology like us we have today that can eliminate that barrier and really let them focus on the more important things of making sure they can respond.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's we're seeing MSSPs
Yes.
used as just a general like everybody's got to build the same detections.
Yep.
Everybody's got to detect the same attacks. Like attackers, they do these little evasions, but the core of the attack, as you mentioned before, it stays the same
Yes.
over and over. So I push back against that. Like attacks are constantly evolving. I guess you can say,
Yeah.
and maybe that kind of evolution where it's very small changes over time.
Right. Agreed.
It's not vastly different from day to day. They're still stealing credentials. They're still exploiting the same stuff.
Yep.
And I was just talking to Alex Pinto from looking at the DBIR report. We can see it not necessarily getting more sophisticated. Same stuff works.
Yes.
It
does.
and unless we get better at this, they don't need to.
Right.
They don't need to significantly change.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
but yeah, I love the automation, the orchestration, the integration between the two of them, because it's just way too much manual stuff.
It is.
Still going on.
It is. I mean, we've lived in, when SOAR hit the market years ago,
Yeah.
everyone was like, okay, we can automate a lot of the mundane steps. But
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggled with fine-tuning or creating the playbooks. And it still is a problem for a lot of organizations today. But there was never the thought about automating the detection process.
Yeah.
And we're at a stage now, it's 2025. We need to be at that stage now.
Wow.
So you mentioned a good point, the MSSPs, that's a huge vertical market for Devo.
Oh yeah.
It's huge because we have multi-tenancy out of the box, and with the capabilities we have for our managed service providers and MDR providers. This is another very powerful thing is they like to sell their secret sauce of building their detection rules, but at least now the detect team engine can test them.
Yeah.
Right. And they could go to their customers and offer as a service to say, every quarter per our SLA, we're going to do a threat assessment and detection assessment for you. FYI, we're doing it on the 30th of this month, and we're going to launch multiple attacks just to show that we got you covered.
Yeah.
So that's also very important space for us, is making sure our partners in the MSSP and MDR arena are spot on and can meet the SLAs that they agree to.
Yeah, and that's a kind of do once, share, use many model.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense for 100,000 organizations to create their own artisanal detections, all for the same attack, all from the same ransomware threat actor.
Right.
It just makes absolutely no sense. We should, do more of this, figuring out how to benefit, build once, use many.
Right. Well, think about it. We've been in the industry a long time. When we first were doing incident response and we found IOCs, we would shove them under the carpet. We do our own little thing so it doesn't hit us twice, but we didn't share.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately now in the industry, we're sharing the threat intelligence, but we're not sharing detection rules.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the arena needs to be now and that's something that Devo's also focusing on is the things that Detect Team is doing for us. We'll put it into the Devo tenant that it's configured with, but also if we identify that it's a worldwide situation and our user community at large would benefit from it, we have what we call Exchange, which we would upload those detection rules into Exchange and share it to all of our users. Yeah. Because we're all in the same battle together, right? Yeah. Share it, like you said.
And it's a great point. I gave a talk yesterday, and one of the highlights, one of the main points of it was attacks are public, defenses are private.
That's right. That's right.
We need to share more.
Absolutely.
So you basically, that was the crux of that slide that I had, which was, I think, the most important slide
Absolutely.
in that talk.
Absolutely.
So excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Jason, for joining me today and having this conversation.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
To find out more about Devo, please visit securityweekly.com/Devo RSAC for all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance. please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're still here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. Keynotes are getting ready to start, so it might be a little background noise, folks. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview segment is Lori Robinson. She's the Vice President of Product Management at SailPoint. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
So,
Glad to be here.
Thank you. I'd love to have you here. So I'm going to say, I know you can't comment on this, but thank you for going public to save the Security Weekly 25 index. I tracked the pure plays, and when you guys went public, you got me back to 25. So thank you. I know you can't talk about it, but thank you.
I'm glad we could help out.
Yeah, thanks. So
It's a good thing.
Yes, it is. And I want to start there a little bit, right? On the identity side of the market, right? What I saw transpire over the past few years is a really interesting consolidation play starting to play out. And I kind of predicted it back earlier. Was we had all these separate isolated kind of identity products out there. How was the consolidation going to happen? You had your IDPs, you had your SSOs, you had your MFAs, your PIMs, your PAN, all this stuff, right?
Yep.
And then what we saw was some really cool identity products go public, and then Thoma Bravo bought them all.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so what's the state of identity from a market perspective right now? What do you see on the product management side? Because I'm seeing consolidation. Are you seeing the same thing?
Certainly, there's consolidation. I like to think of identity and access management. We've gone through fits and waves in the market where it's like everybody goes for niche and best of breed and then swings back to, hey, let's consolidate. And I think there's a little bit of both happening. But when you look across an enterprise organization, security in general, not just identity, but security has been fragmented.
Yes.
And it's difficult for practitioners to try and bring that all together and not just have less vendors, but really get a better understanding of security. And so at SailPoint, we've definitely taken a platform approach and are looking more holistically across the identity security landscape.
I mean, identity was segmented for a long time. Security
Certainly.
didn't even own it. IT owned it for the longest
That's right.
time.
It was more of a IT
Yes.
enabler for a
Yeah,
long time.
exactly was.
Yes. I mean, it still is.
It
But
is.
it is more and more falling into the realm of security, and you're seeing more and more identity teams report up through the security organization.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So as we think about digital transformation,
Yes.
the evolution of the workforce, how does that change what you have to think about on the identity side now?
Yeah. So certainly from SailPoint's perspective, we've always been focused on ensuring that people can manage and secure identities of all types, right?
Right.
So that's our mission, and that's where we're focused, and will continue to be so.
Human, non-human, and everything in between?
Exactly.
Okay.
So now things are changing though, right? Like it used to be, we just had the human workforce, and now more and more we're seeing more machine,
Yep.
third party, and now with AI and cloud, service accounts, machine identities, and of course,
Right.
agents.
Yeah.
And this is really changing the landscape significantly. And I would say, you mentioned there's SSO and MFA and IGA. Those foundational things have remained the same. But what has changed are
Where do you apply them?
where do you apply them? What do you apply them to?
Right.
So we're seeing that more and more. And we're definitely, I like to think, especially with AI, it's both, and the cloud too, but AI specifically, it's both an enabler and a disruptor. And so we're looking at it from the perspective of how can we use AI to enable? So we have, for example, we just released Harbor Pilot, which uses agents to help people. It really enables identity people to do more with their searches and getting information and insight quickly, or even automating workflows. So that's on the enablement side. And then from the disruptor side, certainly AI is something we have to protect.
Yeah.
And the AI infrastructure itself, but also now agents that are acting like a workforce, how do you secure them? And we just recently announced identity security for agents to help manage and govern those identities. So we're
Yeah.
moving with it, I guess.
Exactly. So let's break down each one of those, because I think they're all interesting. Obviously, leveraging AI to enhance outcomes, use cases in the platform is one good way to use artificial intelligence. What does the agent help the practitioner do? I'm like, because again, I've seen a lot of, kind of chatbot kind of approaches, which are fine, but are they really driving and automating workflows? I'd love to understand, like, how is that changing the way people manage identity?
Yeah, so I think there's really two aspects, at least in these early days. One is quicker information gathering, right?
Okay.
Being able to use natural language processing to ask a question and have it search the indexes of the documentation and the information out there and come back with quicker, faster insights on product and information in your environment. So quickly bringing back that data for you. I think that it just makes information gathering quicker.
Easier, yeah.
Yeah. The other one in the initial phases is really workflow creation. So as you look at workflow orchestration in SailPoint or in any solution out there, workflow orchestration can be difficult to architect and put together.
Oh, yeah.
And using these agents, it's able to do it on the fly. It's pretty astonishing, quite frankly, to watch it give you a template for a workflow immediately.
Oh, interesting.
So it's really time saving, it's efficient. And I mean, we've seen significant time savings for our customers.
Oh, that's
using
good.
it.
Yeah. Because if you can make people more efficient, that's a win.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's already made the attackers more efficient. Can we also make the defenders more efficient? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope, right? Is because that is what we're seeing is, obviously with AI powered cyber attacks, the sophistication, the volume, the velocity is increasing at such a rate that how do you keep up with it?
Exactly.
And that's why I say it's both a disruptor and an enabler. Like fight fire with fire. You have to fight AI with AI.
Right,
That's the way I
exactly.
look at it. Yeah.
Now let's talk on the agent side, because there's been a lot of discussion about agentic-based technologies, which creates kind of two interesting aspects. One is what the agents can do for you, right? So some of the use cases I've seen around agentic is the ability to use it to do some of those automated workflows, log into systems, maybe grab evidence, etc. But at the same time, you also have to secure those agents such that they don't do something malicious. Where are you doing both things with agentic, or more on the protection side?
Yeah, so I would say the way I would say it is managing and governing agents. So what we recently announced was applying what we do in the human world of what agents are in our environment, just indexing them, and then ensuring that they have the right access to the right systems. That would be how I would describe the governance.
Okay.
So obviously there's authentication technologies and other things out there, but before you get to that part, you have to establish the identity itself and put those controls. And I think that agents are tricky because some of them act on their own, some of them inherit access from someone else, sometimes they inherit access from multiple people.
Right.
And so it's a sophisticated problem that we're trying to solve, but I think it really boils down to managing the agent identity and governing the access for that agent. Role-based access controls, etc.
Because one of the areas I see some struggles with, because we're in my day job, we're playing with some of these technologies, and it's how do you do that at scale? Like doing it for one is like, you can kind of figure it out, but doing it for hundreds or thousands without creating the administrative overhead, right?
Yeah. I mean, as we advance, right, you start to bring in, I think this is, again, something that applies not just to agents. I think it's hard to do that at scale for any identity, right? So we're looking at, for example, our identity graph as a way of bringing in identities and data from security systems and from other things in the environment, bringing it together and getting a unified view. So first you have an understanding, visibility.
Right.
Pinpointing where there might be risk and, pointing out, hey, this is something you might need to pay attention to. But as we get more sophisticated with our learning models, I think it'll be interesting to see how we can start to automate that and take some of the, I always kind of joke, nobody actually knows who needs access to what. So defining that is kind of hard, right? So we need AI to help us as we mature and define that. And I think as we bring in agents and having that visibility and then putting those learning modules on top of it is going to be really important to help people define those controls.
That's where I find the really interesting use cases for AI outside of the generative AI capabilities, which is how do you model relationships? Because LLMs are not good at modeling data relationships. They're good at parsing data, analyzing data, parking data on stuff, which is why it's so good to generate content off of. But it's not really good at understanding relationships, which is important. But then it's other techniques then to analyze that data in the graphs to actually do something really smart with it.
Right. Sometimes I think we overuse AI when really
We
what
do.
we're just talking about is analytics, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think there's some of that. But I think underlying all of that, I think what's so interesting is bringing data together. It really is about data at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? We're putting whatever kind of AI technology or analytics you put on top of it. I think what's different today is mentioned this is that everything's fragmented. How do we bring it
Right.
together? And for us, the graph is the answer to that. To build a graph that models those relationships, starts to highlight insights and things for you. And so that's really important for us to get to that place where we can make it easier to deploy.
I've said this in a couple different places. It's not necessarily a data problem, but it is the contextual relationship problem, right? Because we have lots of data. We have lots of data in lots of different systems. The graph kind of pulls together the relationship and the context, because once I have the context, then I think we can solve some of these more advanced problems.
That's right.
And to me, the bigger challenge in security has not been the data problem per se. It's more about the relationship and the context of that data to drive better outcomes.
Yep. Absolutely. And of course, behaviors as
Yes,
well in
yeah.
security, like bringing in all of those
Yeah.
pieces, I think starts to bring it together in a more meaningful way.
Yeah.
For sure. Yes.
So from here, where do you see the identity market going? Like what's on the horizon? What are the things you're thinking about in the product management side? Because you're pretty front facing with clients and customers and like the next thing.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of exciting things on the horizon, and we just mentioned a few of them, right? So our agents were really excited about securing AI, really looking into being able to do more with insights and observability and threat modeling. So getting that visibility and getting data out of it becomes really, really important to us. I would also say a lot is happening around, I mean, it's cliche and nobody wants to talk about it, but zero trust, right?
Yeah.
And really getting practical zero trust implementations. So how do you get to a place where you have least privilege and where you have zero standing privilege in a meaningful way, like at scale, as you mentioned?
Right.
How do we do that? So we're looking at technologies out there to help us with zero standing privilege and just-in-time access, if you will, privilege elevation, just-in-time, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So getting to a place where we're a lot smarter about what's happening in our systems and we're able to do more with less from a heavy lift perspective.
Because look, the federal government's been trying to do this for a while. It's a heavy lift, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because when you start with no privilege, which is completely the opposite way we built all these systems, right?
Yeah.
How do you know how much access to give without giving too much? And part of it comes from these learning models,
That's right.
And so again, back to the data context problem, once you have that data, now you can start to train things to say, oh, you're Matt, you're in this group. Yes, you should have access to that, but not this, right? Like
That's right.
Those get pretty sophisticated.
Getting those insights, I think, becomes key to bringing everything together in a meaningful way. I will say too, I think, it is hard, but at SellPoint, we're really focused on not just the deployment, but really getting value out of your system.
Yeah.
And I think that is, if you look at, even this week, we talked about things that we're looking at, like acceleration packages, customer success acceleration packages for our customers, and ensuring not only that they're deploying successfully, but that they continue to get value out of the system.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important is, we have seen that the more someone matures their identity security controls, the more value, business value they get out of it. And, we don't see identity as just like we started the conversation, an IT function, right? it's even bigger than security anymore. We're seeing like CFOs and chief digital officers who are saying, hey, this is important. My customers want to know that they can trust us.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to ensure that
Yeah.
trust? And whether it's from a cyber insurance perspective or your CFO, you have to look at identity holistically and the value it's bringing across the org.
And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, but hopefully we can continue to consolidate and solve that problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lori, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/SailPoint RSAC. Again, thank you, Lori, for
Thank you,
joining
Matt.
us. Stay tuned. We have a couple more interviews coming up.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Head Kovitz, CEO and co-founder at Silverfort. Welcome, Head.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. And I think it's nice we're at the start. We're at the fresh point of RSAC, right? So you haven't talked out, which means that you're going to share a lot with us right now, correct?
Yeah, great.
And I am excited about this because though I don't actively work in this space, I do find identity management to be, in my view, absolutely a cornerstone of all security.
Yeah.
And now it seems as though you have a slightly different take than some. And I'm curious if you will expand on what your take is on IAM versus all the rest of identity security.
Yeah, it's I think very important topic that is, I think, has been very unclear for years, and I think that people have been thinking about identity security and IAM as basically the same thing, and I really don't see it like that. I think that identity security is really the let's say the task of protecting the identities from compromise, where IAM, or identity and access management, that's the identity infrastructure. That's just managing your identities. You know, when a new employee joins the company, you need to create an identity for them. There's a whole like life cycle and things that have to do with productivity that are not really about security. And then identity security is the element of securing that. For many years, we thought about it as just the same thing. You know, security was a feature of IAM. But I think that just like in other areas of security, if you think about it, endpoint security or cloud security or network security, you now have dedicated products for that, right? Securing the cloud, for example, is no longer just a feature that you get from the cloud provider. You buy a platform that does cloud security. And the reason for that is that you have multiple cloud providers. So when you had one, you could just, buy security from them specifically, from Azure or from AWS. But since you have a few different cloud providers, you need a cloud security platform that will sit on top of all these silos. Identity is going through the same evolution now. In the past it was simple. You had one type of identity on-prem. Today you have so many different identity management solutions, right? Companies have Active Directory on-prem, and they have Okta for the cloud, and they have AWS and Google and SaaS applications, and all of these islands of identity management need security, and they need unified security. And that's why finally identity security is becoming its own layer on top of all these islands of identity management.
So I want to ask your opinion on something. Yesterday I attended the keynote by Wendy Nather at B-Side San Francisco. And one part she brought out was her view that antivirus was the silver bullet that was killing correct development of software. That it started requiring, well, now let's buy something else to secure this instead of it being secure from the start or being from the start. So I am curious on your take with that. Do you feel like it is ever going to be possible for identity security to actually be completely handled within either the software or the infrastructure that was currently there, or will it always be something that requires an external point?
My answer might disappoint you.
Go for it. I'm here for that.
I think that it has to be a separate solution, because In order to secure identities, you need to understand the full context of what the identity is doing, right? Now, if you think about a person, you may have a few different accounts, a few different identities, one in Azure and one in Salesforce and one in your on-prem legacy environment. Now, if you think about securing each of these as just an element of that specific piece of infrastructure, you're never going to have the full context. I'll give you an example. You could today log in to one of your cloud applications using, let's say, Okta. And they have security features in there, right? They have like multi-factor authentication and they can detect bad behaviors. And let's say that they do all of that successfully and they discover that it's really not you. It's someone else who took over your account. So they will block you, right? But you can now still log in to your other account in Azure or in the on-prem Active Directory infrastructure, because these solutions don't even talk to each other. So if you're trying to secure each of these things as just a feature of that specific infrastructure, you're not going to have the full context. I think the best analogy of that is, imagine if every type of endpoint will have its own endpoint security feature. So, Lenovo or Apple or Dell will have their own endpoint security that only protects Lenovo computers. That just doesn't give you the full context of what the organization needs.
But why, in your view, is that more required for identity security?
Because in identity, for a long time, we just had one identity on-prem, our Active Directory, that was kind of the most common one. And that had the full context of what the user is doing. So we could argue that security still wasn't good, but at least it was simple. Now that people have multiple identities because of moving to the cloud, because of hybrid and multi-cloud environments, because companies acquire other companies. So you could have Okta, but then you acquire the company and they're using Ping. What do you do? Like, it's becoming more and more complex. And then adding to that is the fact that people now can work from anywhere and they can use any device.
Any device, exactly.
So, a lot of these other security elements like network security or endpoint security are becoming less effective now. And it's almost like identity is the last line of defense. If I can log in from anywhere using any device, as long as I can prove that it's me, then it means that identity is the only thing that stops, an attacker from really accessing anything that the organization have. So identity security is becoming more important. It's also becoming more complex, right? Because of all these silos. And we just need a new approach, a more consolidated approach to secure it somehow.
Well, what is your viewpoint or Silverford's approach? Because it's not just those items, but literally the quantity of things that require identification. Like you mentioned that previously it was just on-prem.
Yeah.
So you just had the person, you were only identifying one person, but now will you speak more on the non-human identities and the amount of identity security that's now taking over because of that?
You're right. One of the biggest elements that is adding complexity to this problem now is non-human identities, because they are growing much faster than the number of humans in the company. Not only because you have service accounts and all kinds of different applications talking to other applications, which we've had for years. It's growing fast, but now it's going even faster with AI, because of AI agents and all these new non-human automated things that need to talk to each other and need to access your systems, and they need to do it with some identity. How do we secure that? Even the old approach that we used for years for authenticating human users, like multi-factor authentication, for example, you would get a message to your phone and you would say, yes, it's really me. How do you do that for a script or an AI agent? They don't have thumbs to click on the app, and they don't have it's not going to work. So you need a new approach. How do you even secure them? How do you even know about them? How do you even know which of your identities is a human and which is used by a non-human? It's not always that clear. How do you know what is it accessing? How do you know if it should be able to access those things? The easiest thing is to give those AI agents or those automated scripts access to anything, because you don't know for sure what they're going to need. So why not just give them access to anything? But then you're exposing yourself to huge risk. It's really a problem that is going very fast and most organizations are not prepared to address. So now there is a lot of hype around non-human identity security, I think for a good reason.
Yes.
We've had that offering for years. I think we were one of the first to really address this problem as one of our focus areas, several years ago. But we started from where enterprises were, which was mostly on-prem, Active Directory and Azure and a few of these things. Now we just expanded, and we announced this today. We just expanded our offering to cover basically any type of non-human identity across, all the big identity providers, all the big cloud infrastructure providers, even all the major SaaS applications. So even if you have, somebody created an account specifically within Salesforce or within GitHub, we can protect those too, even if they're not under some kind of centralized managed identity like an Okta or an Entra.
Really?
Yeah, we can connect directly to these SaaS applications and find all those non-human identities and secure them. But even the legacy ones, which I think is even more complex, like the Active Directory service accounts, which nobody could effectively secure, we found a way to do that also. So it's really an end-to-end solution for all of these non-human identities.
And what is that called?
So the whole platform is called the Silverfort Identity Security Platform. Specifically within that, we have many modules. I think we are at this point probably the broadest identity security platform in the market. We're doing anything from ITDR, which is detecting identity attacks, and ISPM, which is about identity exposure. We enable multi-factor authentication. We protect privilege access. We protect non-human identities, which is this module. We do identity-based segmentation. We help with least privilege and just-in-time access. It's really a very broad platform that covers, all the different environments, all the different identities, all the different resources. Specifically, this product we call the non-human identity security product, which is, I think, pretty
Yes.
straightforward name. And where it really differentiates is first because we look at non-human identities not as a point solution, not as just an island that we need to look at specifically, but as part of the broader context of all identities. Because non-human identities, they do interact with human identities and with other resources because somebody, for example, created them. So if you created a non-human identity, if you created some account in order to run the application that you built, it's not enough for us to only look at the non-human identity. We also need to map it to you and see what you are doing and look at all of it as part of one big story. We also don't look specifically at cloud. We look at cloud and on-prem. So I think the advantage we have is just that kind of end-to-end coverage. And also the fact that we don't just give you visibility, we also have a way to enforce protection. We can prevent a non-human identity from being used outside of what it was designed for. So if you have a service account that you built and it only needs to log in from this server to this database every day, we can make it only possible to use it like that. If somebody will try to use it anywhere else, they will be blocked. Which I think is really important because not only we defenders are using AI now, but attackers are using AI.
Right.
And attacks are becoming faster as a result of it, right? Attacks can happen within seconds now because they're fully automated with AI, and it's only going to get more sophisticated. This means that detection and visibility are not going to be enough because it's going to be too late. So you really need to think about real-time enforcement and prevention in the world of very fast AI-driven attacks. Detection alone is just not going to be helpful. So we are thinking, every problem we're trying to address, we think about how do we stop attacks in real time and not just detect them.
And are there any components for Silverfort's non-human identity security that goes beyond just defending on this side and defending the NHIs that we want to be there? But is there anything specific to defending against non-human identities that are a part of an attack?
Yeah, we are looking for anyone trying to compromise a non-human identity, anyone trying to use it for lateral movement or for anything malicious. Even just, if somebody's trying to use one of these accounts to do something that is outside of what this identity was intended for. Because the good thing about most of the non-human identities is that they have a very clear purpose. Maybe nobody remembers it because the person who created them already left the company 10 years ago, but we can find it because we can see what they're actually doing, and we can tell you that this non-human identity, we see that it's only used to log in from A to B every day.
Okay.
And by helping you understand that, we can also help you understand what it should be used for, and put a virtual fence around it so that nobody will be able to use it anywhere else. Now, AI agents are making that problem much more complex, because AI agents are not as predictable. You don't know that they're going to log in from A to B every day. They might do something different. That's the nature of LLMs, right?
Yes.
You can predict them. So, you may have an AI agent that is only meant to do this, but one day it does something else. Is this okay? Is this just the agent learning that it needs to do, something extra, and it's a good thing? Or is it not a good thing? Is it malicious? Or is it just the agent is going out of control? That's a much harder problem, and we are focused on it now. And I think that we're going to be able to build something that is really ahead of the industry in solving that problem of how do you control and restrict the access of AI agents, even in this kind of very unpredictable, very complex, fast evolving world. You still need to put some controls, because for organizations to enjoy the benefits of AI, they need to have a way to do it safely, without the AI potentially causing damage to them. So I think it's
Well,
going to be a very important problem.
Absolutely. And the security teams need something that integrates where they are able to view in a broad way. So I'm assuming that like the dashboard, and I am going to also mention that you have written a playbook that is for the
Yeah.
security teams that goes well with that. But it's fascinating to me to look at the concept of having one unified place where the security teams and security practitioners can instantaneously view. Perhaps, I mean, I think we're moving through millions of non-human identities while trying to keep the human identities safe as well.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah, and you're right. We wrote a playbook for that because we realized that most organizations were looking at identity security as almost an afterthought until now. They were looking at it as a feature of identity management. Now that it's becoming a more important and more complex problem, organizations are trying to figure out how to do it properly. So we wrote a playbook by talking to a lot of companies. We serve more than 1,000 organizations.
Yeah.
And we worked with them to understand what is the best way to do it, and wrote a playbook that really breaks it down to the steps that you need to take, from integrating to all of your different environments and identity management solutions, to discovering all the different identities and resources, to enforcing security controls, to analyzing all of that, and make sure the whole thing is also very lightweight, so that you don't need to spend years deploying it, which was historically always the problem with identity security. The good news is there is an easy way to do it. There is a much faster way to do it now. And organizations are finally learning that there are modern ways to solve this problem.
Excellent. Now let's close on that idea of lightweight, and especially of lightweight but effective deployment. And thank you, Head, for joining us today. To find out more about Silverfort, please visit securityweekly.com/SilverfortRSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Head, for being here. And stick around. We'll be back after the break with more interviews live from the RSAC conference, Broadcast Alley 2025. Thank you, Head, for being
Thank you
here.
very much.